I remember getting very depressed. And I think that was my first time ever going to therapy for it. On top of that, it was really hard to manage doing that. I kind of kept it to myself that I was seeking therapy, which felt like it shouldn't have been a secret, but it also felt like there was something wrong with me if I did like go to my coaches or even some of my teammates, because I'd see everybody else being fine. And this is just what college track life is. And it took a really long time for me to get over that hump, even after I did the course on my therapy. And I think it just took one, getting older, and then also starting to look at what I wanted to do with my life after. Because I
Micah Cox, how are you doing today?
Good, Kendrick. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this conversation. I know we talked months ago. We were at a conference, San Diego, which it seems like it was forever ago.
I know.
And I don't even know. I think I brought up some of my interests, or I started talking to you, and we actually had where I formerly coached at. You knew of a girl who was also went to that my school where I was coaching. She was your teammate, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I was like, man, small world. And of course I had to ask you. I was like, Micah, you got to be on Coats and Conversation. So I appreciate you taking the time to be on the podcast. In this episode, definitely going to get into some of your experiences as being a Division I track and field athlete, some of the mental health experiences, and we'll also dive into some of the racial experiences. I think as therapists in this field, especially with me being interested in working with athletes, I think we have seen more and more athletes come out talking about their own mental health experiences, but I haven't come across a whole lot of interviews or podcasts with former athletes who have talked about their racial experiences as athletes. And so, to jump into the first question relating mental health, how did you navigate the challenges of balancing your athletic and academic commitments while also dealing with your mental health issues?
Yeah, so that was a lot. I feel like thinking on that question, I'm like, at first, it seemed manageable because everything was new. So it's like, it's fine. But I think once we really started getting into what it meant to be a D1 athlete and how rigorous your schedule is going to be, how you kind of are like on your team's time and you just incorporate classes and stuff. It got hard. I think it was around my sophomore year. Well, I got injured first year, so that added its own effect to it, and not being able to compete or feeling left out or feeling behind from class that came in with me. And then feeling like, okay, getting better, I can go. And then everything just starts to hit. Sophomore years, classes are starting to get a little harder. The pressure is now on us because we're not the new class anymore. They expect different type of performance out of us. So I remember getting very depressed. And I think that was my first time ever going to therapy for it. On top of that, it was really hard to manage doing that. I kind of kept it to myself that I was seeking therapy, which felt like it shouldn't have been a secret, but it also felt like there was something wrong with me if I did like go to my coaches or even some of my teammates, because I'd see everybody else being fine. And this is just what college track life is. And it took a really long time for me to get over that hump, even after I did the course on my therapy. And I think it just took one, getting older, and then also starting to look at what I wanted to do with my life after. Because I think as a college athlete, you can get really stuck into this is like all that matters right now. Like, this is where I'm going. And a lot of people, especially in track, is to go to the Olympics or become a pro. And of course, that used to be in my mind. But looking at reality, you're like, okay, clearly that's not what's going to happen. So I think once I shifted my focus to what I wanted to do, which happened to be being an MFT, I think I started finding joy again. And I was able to help me navigate the rest of track and school in a different light versus how it started. But Definitely hard the entire time.
When you share that, and I appreciate you sharing that, because I think for, I mean, some of the athletes that I've talked to and have coached in the past, they talk about, what's my coach going to think if he or she knows that I'm seeking out mental health services for my own well-being. But the other thing is my playtime going to be cut, or am I going to be taken off of in track and field a relay team or out in a specific event? And I think that is the experience of many athletes, of having the fear of actually speaking up or going to seek out mental health services, because it's like, okay, if I go to this therapist who's affiliated with the university, is this therapist or psychologist going to then go and tell my coach about what we talk about or the things that I'm experiencing? So in a recent survey done by the NCAA, they did a study, and it showed that rates of exhaustion, anxiety, and depression among student athletes have remained elevated since 2020. So you take into consideration COVID. But there's that other piece, and I'm curious about this: an athlete being on scholarship, experiencing mental health issues. What does depression even look like? Because there are some coaches out there that say, oh well, this athlete just doesn't want to come to practice, they're being lazy, or oh well, they're getting injured all the time, it can't be it can't be mental related. So what did it look like when you were experiencing depression?
And it's kind of strange because I think I would want to skip practice and like avoid and be alone. But because of knowing you can't do that because that'll risk you getting kicked off the team or getting penalized in some way, you just push through. So I think it poured out in other areas of my life. I feel like I was just agitated a lot. I think I was distancing myself from my friends and where I did feel supported and could feel that type of community, especially being away from home. And yeah, I think a lot of it was irritation though. And then I ended up getting injured again. So I think, like you were just naming, having poor mental health does affect how you heal and if you can get that re-injured or if you get a new one, because especially track, it's a super mental sport. And I feel if your mind isn't right and like set for the goals you're trying to meet and the determination you need, it's easy to trip up and pull something, or you're not paying attention and you hurt something, either tripping, falling, whatever event you're doing, whatever it could be. It was really hard to sit in that space feeling depressed and realize that I was, because I just thought like I hate it here and like I'm homesick or something. And it took a long time, especially like going through therapy, to realize like, no, you're just mentally not doing the best right now and it's affecting you.
And that's like, I'd imagine, just as athletes of color, the added pressure that is on us sometimes, because when you start looking at some of the bigger programs, football, basketball, which are largely dominated by athletes of color, and then you think of how many athletes are under scholarship, there are so many different pressures, and on top of academic requirements. So you wanting to isolate and be away from friends, being away from team, wasn't actually you not wanting to be a part of the sport that you love. It was like you were trying to cope the best that you could. And yeah, I'd imagine it was, lonely. Maybe there was confusion. Can you kind of speak on that? Because, for athletes out there that are experiencing these things, like what was the, oh, something's really going on now with me.
When you say confusion, I'm like, oh yeah, definitely was feeling that, because I was like, why do I feel like I hate track? And that's been my life since I was 11. So I was confused and I felt defeated almost. Like, I guess this isn't for me anymore. Like, I'm over that season, but in the middle of it doesn't feel okay to have that feeling coming on.
Did you feel like, were you like, why am I feeling
Yeah.
isolated? Why do I want to push away or pull away from my coaches or teammates?
Oh yeah, that moment. I think I can't remember the exact situation that was going on, but I was in a situation or like a confrontation with a friend, and it just got super escalated. And I like in the middle of it took a step back and was like, this is not me. And I like don't think I'm okay. And then my roommate at the time, we were really close. She was like able to sit there and actually express the things she had observed seeing in me, like you don't leave your room and you're real snappy, or you're just not interested in the things that make you happy. Like I think she even said, I barely even see you smile anymore. And if you know me, I
Mm,
do a lot. So it was like, okay, I think I need to go seek help, especially, but even that realization was hard to sit with because up until I got to college, that wasn't taught in like our home or through my family and friends to seek help. You know, Black people don't do that. So it was even that was scary too, to like be like, I'm gonna try and see what happens, but I don't regret it at all.
that part there where Black people don't seek out help, so common in our community. And just I think the important piece for any of the listeners or viewers is the piece where you said my roommate was there to point out some of the things that I was experiencing, and even saying, well, you don't even smile anymore. And I just think about, like, in our community, how many people are actually, whether you're athlete or non-athlete, how many people in our community actually experience those things, and it manifests itself in either snapping or isolating or just like losing any type of interest for hobbies or the sport that you are in. And I want to say that I think that's why it's so important to have a racially diverse coaching staff, because in my experiences, as a former coach, I was around coaches who didn't understand the culture, didn't understand how to talk to the athletes that look like you and I. And so there was that gap of like, why doesn't this athlete talk to that coach, but talks to this coach and opens up to this coach and is like, okay, this coach opens up space for the athlete. This coach understands what's going on for this athlete. Whereas the other coach is just strictly X's and O's, nothing more. It's just X's and O, execute this play, execute this race. That's it. You do something for me. I don't care about you. And I think that is some of the things that I come across with athletes talk about, is like, this is beginning to feel like we are just machines for this university, which takes me into my next question. I think there is, or a lot of athletes out there who do experience racism. So my next question, racism in athletes is something we often don't hear many athletes talk about. Can you share your experiences dealing with racism as a college athlete at a predominantly white institution?
I think being an athlete and having so much gear that give you really saved what my experience could have been. And even saying that now, however many years, I don't know how many years that's been now, but later I'm sitting here like, that doesn't feel good to have like that armor of my track uniform, my track clothes on. Like a lot of times I would notice if we're out and we have like we're just leaving practice or something. So everything is like school logo and all that. We look athletic, have a bag or something. People are friendly. They want to chit chat. They want to ask what sports you do, all this. But then you go out the next day and you didn't practice and you're just in your normal clothes and like it stares and move away from you. Like if you come too close, I think even sometimes service at restaurants and stuff would be different. There was, I think, when I would be in normal clothes, I barely ever had side conversation with people of the city that I was in. And I'm just like, obviously, I don't care enough to be like, why don't you guys want to talk to me? But it's like, you notice it. And it's like, that sucks. And I can only imagine, like, for my friends that were just normal students, that were people of color, what their experience was like in general, because they didn't even have the opportunity to be treated a different way because they were athletes there. I even noticed, depending on who I was with, also changed the way people would come to us. If I was with a lot of Black student athletes, then it's still like the ladder of, okay, they're athletes, so they're probably cool, but we're just gonna stay away from them or not chit chat. But if I'm like with some of my white peers, then it's different. They want to talk. And that's when really what do you guys do? That's so exciting. What year are you? All that. So it's just an ugly feeling to notice when you do. So I think a lot of times me and my peers, I think, would talk about this. We just try to like shut it out. And then now we're in a bubble that we've created for each other. So that does feel safe because all of us are from out of town and we're in this place where it's like, it seems like the people of the city don't even like us. And I would even say that for like on the university level, even like with professors and stuff, I think expect if professors knew you were an athlete, they didn't really expect much out of you. And like I think I probably in the time was like, that's nice. Like I could just breeze by. But like looking now and I'm like, that's not okay because a lot of us are still here for education because like I said, we're gonna go do something else after this. We're not always gonna stay in athletics. And to just treat us like they're just here for their sport. They don't care sucks because a lot of Black people are academics and they want the education to be able to get to wherever they're going. So yeah, that's how it manifested a lot for me, which I feel is probably nicer than others that's been in this predicament.
That part with noticing how the community interacted with you when you were with athletes of color versus athletes who are white, and it was just like just the different energy. And I think as people of color, we can feel those subtleties, just and it could just be on just a very minute level, but the energy shift is real. And I think that this is the part where I don't think students understand what everything that student athletes go through. So it's like, okay, one day you got your gear on, and it's like, hey, Micah, how you doing? You just got regular clothes on. You're just another Black person at the university.
Mm-hmm.
And you're just like, dang, like this further confirms like our experiences as people of color. Like we feel these everywhere we go. It could be on a PWI, it could be at a restaurant, it could be anywhere. It's like the treatment is different. How did that play into your academics and just your athletic journey?
I feel academics, like I was saying, declined at one point because that mindset that, well, they expect me to just do the bare minimum, barely come, turn in whatever, I might as well so I can focus on track. But
Mm.
after a while, that interferes with track because if your grades are doing poor, you can't participate. So it's like a double-edged sword almost of like, you have to try, but your professor doesn't really care if you try. But then also you need it so you can show up. Luckily, the time I was there was a lot of Black track athletes. So I feel that felt like the safest place to just like be me and know I can like express myself the way I normally would and not feel self-conscious about anything. So I will say we were really lucky to have that space with each other and it not feel like what we're experiencing on campus and just in the city is pouring into like practice. But I will say like going on meets and stuff, and especially if it's another PWI, it's the same thing, but it's on a larger scale because there's a whole bunch of us. So there, it's easier to just be like, I'll avoid a whole group of people, or we'll just like talk to the coach because that's fine. He's like the representation. He's a white man. That's fine to do, you know.
I was when you mentioned that going to just a track meet, I remember towards the end of my coaching career, I was at a meet and I was talking to a coach who was white. And we were talking about, I was explaining an athlete to him that I knew of in our community or around our community, and the coach didn't know who it was. And he's like, oh, yeah, I know that colored boy. And in that instance, I was just like, and this is like early 2020s, 2022, somewhere around there, for the coach to say that. And then I'm thinking about reflecting on how the year went and seeing how he interacted with all of the other student athletes who didn't look like him.
Mm-hmm.
Just like how often does this happen where an athlete has maybe a racist coach? Or
Mhm.
a coach, and maybe you give some folks the benefit of the doubt. What about a coach who is not culturally competent to have conversations around race? And I've seen that a lot, and I've heard athletes talk about or talk about how their coaches have referred to them as, oh, you people.
Wow.
And just like you start hearing those things. So as a student athlete, I could see where, the academic side for you could fall off a little bit, especially if you are in the position where the professor's like, oh yeah, whatever, it's all good. But that's also an issue with just like, oh, well, you're just here for athletics. You don't need an education. The stereotypes of student athletes is real. And I think that's the unfortunate part, because as you mentioned, there are a lot of people of color, Black people, that are in academics, and we belong there. So what support systems or resources do you believe college athletic programs could explore to effectively combat the racism many athletes face during competition and within team dynamics?
That's a good one. I think because short story, when junior year, COVID happened, but also all of the protests after George Floyd was killed ensued. And of course, I was everywhere and I was on our campus too. And so our team, like most institutions and workplaces and whatnot, felt obligated to take time to address it and leave space for people to talk about it if any feelings are coming up. All that. To me, in my head, that's like checking the box. So I don't really see it as that useful, just like a DEI training. Like it's just like make sure we
Yes.
tell them don't be racist.
Exactly.
So of course, like it was nothing because you have like Black students like, well, you guys know how all of us feel. This our reality though. And then white students, like maybe some white savior ones and other ones that are just like, doesn't seem like my topic to speak on, which also is always a problem. But I will say, because we did have one Black coach and some of our Black students that were more like leaders on the team decided to form a group where we kind of like educated in a way, and like we're just kind of the representation of Black culture, Black awareness, racism, how it needs to stop, and kind of just like trying to give room to shed light on Black people are here in academia, they're on the team, they're important, our history matters. It was really cool. I was able to be the social media person there. So like I'd always update our Instagram and Twitter and stuff with like events that are going like Black History Month, a whole bunch of posts, or if we were doing an event or something. And it was really nice. But I feel like that's just a small step. And it's like, it's student led. And so that also is like, yes, our students should be advocating for justice, but also people who have more power than us, like faculty and coaches, need to be doing it too, and at a way bigger, way bigger scale than we're doing it. So I feel like I'm still trying to figure out like how can we make people care, because I think yes, we can have a whole bunch of trainings and conversations and small groups that I've seen like other places try, but how do we voice that like it matters and everybody should care no matter if you look like us or not? And that's the hardest part. I think that we're all still trying to figure out, even like in my program right now, that's still a conversation that comes up. And there's less representation of us in there. And so it's like, we do it at one campus, but what does that mean about the 800 other ones across the country?
The You mentioned how it was student led, student athlete led. And in my mind, I think, okay, if there's a problem with an organization, yes, it's good to have input from the employees, but it's a top down type of situation. I wonder if, and maybe I know the answer to this, but just kind of get your perspective. Do you think that just a lot of coaches don't want to even talk or even acknowledge that that's an issue and have the discussion around those things?
I want to, because I want to see the good in everybody, believe they mostly want to, but I think because of the culture we've created on the internet and like canceling people and stuff, people are very now super scared to speak up, especially when they feel like this isn't my place to say it, or I don't know enough. I'm nervous of sounding ignorant. And I get it. Nobody wants to talk about something they don't know. But I think that further implies why educating yourself, you can't wait until a person of color comes to educate you about it, like taking the time to learn. We all know white history. They
Yeah.
know. So I'm like, what's stopping you from picking up a book, Googling something, so you are aware, and then you know how to advocate in a way that's actually helpful and spreading the message that racism is wrong, Black people aren't the enemy, and we deserve to be treated the same as everyone else. Every person of color does, like we all should be not equal, but equitable. I learned that a few weeks months ago.
There's I want to stay on this topic for a second because I again just tying it back to athletics and things that we can do. I was thinking back on, you remember the situation with the LA Clippers? I want to say it was the owners. I can't Donald Sterling or something, where he was making racial slurs in I think it was a one-on-one meeting, and it was being recorded, and he eventually had to sell the team, and the players united. I think some of this is, one, having the spaces for athletes to actually speak up about this thing, because I don't think anything positive comes from suppressing or isolating issues to where it's kind of like, and some organizations do this well. We've had this like, we have this issue here, and we're just gonna keep it hush hush in house. And I think that is the bigger issue, is where these things do happen, but they don't get out to the masses to where people know about these things to actually speak up more about their experiences. So I give you props for speaking about this, because it is difficult. Because the other thing that, whether it be student athlete or non-student athlete, is if we actually speak up about these things, what are the repercussions? And that's
Mhm.
always in the back of our minds. If we speak up about this thing, what are people, one, going to say about us, and how are they going to come at us to make us look like we're the bad guys for speaking up about whether it be the injustice or these inequitable practices within an organization? Going back now, we talk through, some of the mental health barriers that you were experiencing, to experiencing racism. If you were to go back, would you change anything about your own experience as far as being a student athlete?
I'll say no. I think if you asked me as soon as I graduated, I'd say yes. And I'd say I picked a different school. But I do think, regardless of the pain and discomfort that came all those 4 years, it still was able to teach lessons. And like, we can't be mad at learning a lesson so we can do better. I think having that moment where a lot of us were able to come together and start something felt good. It felt like, okay, we do have a small voice, even if it's only getting to our team. We would hope that this is just the beginning and it's able to get into the whole university and it's a whole part of the university instead of just for the track team, or at least for all the athletics. It's just hard. Like I'm still always torn between, like, it sucks feeling like you had to be part of the example, but it's also, you have to think about, if you look back through history, a lot of people have to be the example for the message to finally get across. And I think that's always all of us left hoping, like, I hope our little small thing can just continue to make things change.
Kind of switching gears, you now obviously former athlete, so your life has changed from being an athlete to working in the mental health space. Now, as a therapist, specifically marriage and family therapist, what have you taken from being a former athlete that has helped you and the clients that you work with?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, of course, the like time management and all those logistical things, that was great. I mean, I feel like I'm always on time for things and I can stay organized. Um, but I also just think staying motivated is something that's really helped me going into this career. Because as you know, being another fellow mental health professional, it is very, very hard to keep the motivation going, especially like when those feelings of burnout come, or if it's just like a heavy week. Hearing a lot of heavy stories is hard sometimes. So I think just like in track, having a lot of bad weeks where it just felt like this is not it, this feels horrible, I suck, all those negative things. But then learning how to stay motivated and keep pushing because, like, this is just part of the ups and downs of a journey. That's okay. That's been really helpful. And I think that even translates into how I show up with my clients and using that motivation piece. Because I think a lot of issues, a part of it is like not feeling motivated to change. And I think we have to want to change in order to start working towards it. And I would say adapting to new environments. Track also helped with that into this space now. Because like I said, I was really just track. I mean, I even though I had had an idea of what I wanted to do afterwards, like I wasn't really working in jobs that had to do with that until about like my senior year. Up until then, I'm like doing small jobs just for little money, but I'm like, I'm just worried about track. I need something that won't interfere with what I got going on. And so being able to adapt to a new environment where this is like being a therapist is such a different thing than being an athlete. Like you're more calm, cool, collected, and you're servicing others versus like servicing yourself. Cause I feel like in track, yeah, you're on a team, but a lot of it is individual work. So I think taking that of like, you know how to go from different spaces and show parts of you has been really helpful in this space as a therapist now.
That part where it being able to adapt, especially if, I mean, obviously as therapists, we sometimes have a little bit of a plan or an idea or a specific model we may use while working with couples or working with families or individuals. And then sometimes it happens where people come in and drop a bomb and we're like, oops, scrap that. Got to go this way. And it's very, very similar to athletics where, you know, competition day, where especially if you're outdoors and it's supposed to be sunny and all of a sudden you have 5 to 10 mile headwind. So just
Mm-hmm.
changes the dynamics of a race or a jump. I just appreciate the experience of one being a coach and an athlete because there are so many different things that, as you mentioned, have we been able to take those from our experiences as athletes and use them in the therapy room. But I also find that sometimes that coaching aspect comes out as well because we've been around sports for so long. And you said sometimes people sometimes lose the motivation to change, and we, that little inner coach in us comes out and like, dog, you got it, man, you got it, type of thing. Micah, I just want to say that I appreciate you sharing all of your experiences as a former athlete. I appreciate everything that you're currently pouring into the community and the folks that you're working with. I think it is so powerful. One, having representation in this field, but two, having somebody that has a purpose in this field and is passionate about the work that they do. I give you your flowers, and I'm just looking forward to the things that you do in the future, because once an athlete, always an athlete, but we always have that mindset as well of wanting to win wherever we're at. And so I'm excited for what the future holds for you and some of the great work that you bring to this field of marriage and family therapy.
Thank you so much, Kendrick. I appreciate you asking me to be on here. I'm always down to talk about sports and mental health. And seeing a Black man that's passionate about this is even more refreshing. So I appreciate it so
Yeah,
much.
thank you. Thank you. If you are listening or watching Coats and Conversation on YouTube, be sure to like and subscribe. Leave a comment below and let us know what the best part of this episode was. If you're listening to Coats and Conversation on Spotify or Apple, be sure to share this with another athlete. There are so many athletes out there that are going through their own mental health situations, and there are athletes out there that are facing racism that is impacting their mental health and academic careers. Share this episode with them and touch another life, because these conversations are so powerful. And the more and more that we can bring this conversation to light, the more and more we can help others out there.